Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Retail Bulletin's conference today on employee engagement. My name is Keeffe, and I'll be your host this morning, and I've got some fantastic panelists here who'll introduce themselves to you in a moment. The session we're going to be following over the next hour is how do you engage your workforce now and in the future? Over the last year, all of us in HR, particularly those also who work in retail and hospitality, have been really challenged with staff being in and out of our places of work and all of the different changes. So how do you keep your communication effective? How do you keep motivating and engaging employees? And you're going to hear some fantastic examples this morning from the front line of how different organizations from fintech to retail have actually addressed this challenge. I'm Keeffe. I'm the founder of the Innovation Beehive. After, someone described it as decades, rather unflatteringly, after decades of senior HR roles, I went into the dark side of consulting and founded the Innovation Beehive to accelerate potentials of leaders, brands, organizations, and teams. Taking our inspiration from Silicon Valley, we use innovation techniques to solve people challenges in leadership, culture, and pure play innovation. But you're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from our fantastic panelists. So let's just hear from them. If they'd like to just go round and introduce yourselves, and then we'll have a chat. So Miranda, do you want to say hello? Tell everyone where you're from and what you do.
Good morning, Mark. Thanks very much for having me. I'm Miranda, and I'm the People Director at the wonderful GAIL's Bakery.
Super, lovely, very nice to see you, and I'm sure we've all been nourished by you over the last year. In our setup, we've all been lobbying to have GAILs come to our local towns and villages. So use the chat function to tell Miranda where you'd like your next GAILs.
I'll take note.
And then super, Sharon, good morning. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Morning, Mark. Yes, my name's Sharon Ashcroft, and I'm Group HR Director at Ford Retail, but you probably know us as Trust Ford, Quick Fit, no we're not, we're Quick Fit are our competitor, and Ports Plus distribution centres. So basically car dealerships, wholly owned subsidiary of Ford Motor Company. So they make them, we sell them.
Super, lovely to have you here. Okay, and then Laura, say hello to everyone.
Good morning, I'm Laura. I'm Global Head of Talent for WorldRemit. So I'm the FinTech lady on today. What we do is send money to emerging countries.
Super, great. Thank you very much. And then Kirsty.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, I'm Kirsty Rogers, an employment and discrimination partner. I think this is the 4th year I've been at the Retail Bulletin, so thank you for inviting me back. I don't just talk about claims, though. I'm working on diversity, inclusion and engagement and trying to help organisations rather than waiting for them to land, and delighted to be on here today and part of the lobbying group for GAIL's Bakery to come to the north of England.
Great.
Super, do my best.
So we're all working from home at the moment, so do apologise. Do forgive us if children, dogs, all sorts of, I have this thing that Amazon somehow have a GPS. As soon as you go into a Zoom call, boom, they're at the door. So this is real life. If we have to answer the door, we have to answer the door. But engagement, huge topic. I think HR really had to step up over the last year, and particularly how we engage with our employees. Miranda, you had a particular challenge at GAIL's, didn't you? Because you remained open during the pandemic and did a lot of work with your teams to understand how they can feel safe and carry on serving your customers. Do you want to tell us a little bit around sort of where you were a year ago? Because it was almost a year ago where you suddenly had to stay up all night, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. And you know, we'd just been mentioned on CNN by Christina and Paul for the work that we were doing for the NHS, you know, going from that international high and then be told to close. You know, we looked at what the government was asking. We also had to ask ourselves who we were as a brand. And our first reaction as bakers is, you know, in a crisis, you know, get some soup, get some bread, and kind of, you know, nurture people. And by 4 a.m. on the 24th of March, as a leadership team, we made the decision to stay open and left it up to our teams to decide, you know, if they wanted to come to work. And basically join us on this unknown but very purposeful journey. We had 20% of our team say yes, we're going to continue the journey with you. So we kept 12 of our then 62 bakeries open. We had to adapt very, very quickly in terms of safe ways of working. We had to adapt our range, our offer. It was takeaway only. We had to adapt our rotas to move people around, so we had teams working together. We were looking at daily customer feedback and insights. How did we support our teams with the conversations that our customers were having? And we also capitalised on cross-training. So because we had a reduced number of people in the bakery, how could we be far more efficient with our teams when we might have had one person, and in normal circumstances, we would then have 3 people doing the job. So we really supported the training and development of our craft to all our teams very quickly. We had twice a day leadership team calls. For everyone in HR knows that the rules were coming fast and slow at the same time. The one thing that we wanted to do was to be really, really open and transparent to our teams. When we didn't know, we let our teams know that we didn't know. And as soon as we did, we would then communicate to our teams. We built a wellbeing team, so there were daily calls with our wellbeing team to answer any calls directly from, so it was peer-to-peer rather than senior managers jumping onto the calls. And we also had, what was very important for us, weekly catch-ups with our EHO as well to make sure that we were trading safely. But in essence, to our engagement with our teams, we had 2 work streams, those in work and those in furlough, both with exact amount of care and communication. And for those in work, it was constant feedback, ideas, suggestions, team calls, how efficient we were being as a leadership team in directing people. Was that landing well for people? We also listened to our customers as well, because the conversations that were happening with our customers, some of our teams found it hard to respond. What is the right thing to say? Should I be wearing a mask? You know, how long should the queue be outside? How far should people be, especially when... Did
you capture that best practice and those questions that came through and share them across all the 67 bakeries?
Yeah, so what we did was we captured frequently asked Q&As and we shared them, and we were also mindful of not overloading our teams with lots of information to try and figure their way out through things. But what we did is on a bi-daily basis, for any information we knew to help our teams, what we then did was we shared that knowledge. We then used our training teams then to surmise the best way to respond to a customer.
I'm wondering if, you had staff who were in bakery and then staff who were at home. Did you notice any different levels of engagement, or did you have any particular strategies or tactics to deal with the 2 distinct populations?
Yeah, a great question. We issued 108 pieces of communication equally to both sets of people in furlough and outside of furlough. We also capitalised on, our local community Facebook group. 600% it went up on usage, where people were sharing what they were doing at home and sharing what they were doing at work. So there was this unity, this camaraderie, and it was a very personal thing for our teams that wanted to stay at home. But what they were seeing with the teams that were working were seeing it's safe to come into work. GAILs are looking after us. We're actually okay, and we're having fun. So that's supported massively. And there's a lot of people that are within GAILs who understand our purpose. So one of the examples that we shared with everybody on our Facebook community was Mary Quick, who's one of our partners. Because we stayed open, her 200-year plus farming business remained open, and that was really, really precious to us. It wasn't just that we were maintaining livelihoods in GAILs, but it was the partners that we work with also. We had a positive impact on.
I'm hearing about peer-to-peer communication, constantly updating, senior leaders communicating together, being very visible out there, and sharing information. You've also talked about engaging with customers. Sharon, I know Trust Forward, an incredibly customer-first organisation. I had the pleasure of working with you a couple of years ago, and you are absolutely put your customer at the heart of the organisation. I'm just wondering, in terms of employee comms and also hearing what customers are saying, is there any particular tactics you had to make sure that you were taking the concerns of the customers, relaying those to employees so that they could therefore respond to what customers needed at that time?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So again, our purpose is to drive the standard in customer care, both internal and external. We were in a different position to GAILs. Car dealerships, we were told to close other than after sales. And again, just as part of the engagement piece, we only operated our after sales for essential or key workers, so that the colleagues could see it wasn't a profit at all costs. We're very, very specific. So then the colleagues who did come into work, so weren't on furlough, came in because actually they were giving back to customers, giving back to the community, doing the right thing, keeping the blue lights on the road. So it was difficult, but really kept them engaged. Now, how we communicated, we have a colleague app. So just like Miranda, we worked all hours of the morning. As soon as the government made an announcement, you know, we would put a comms out straight away, and everyone's got the app on the phone, so they could be sat home, on furlough, off furlough. They would know, you know, there was no mixed messages. An example would be, I think it was in the early days, it was, you know, always to come into work. And so the message went out, everyone stay at home. We'll tell you what to do next. And they got that instant. So it took away that worry. They also knew then to be able to communicate with customers. All the health and safety measures, you know, it was great because they absolutely all got the same message at the same time, whether they were on furlough or off furlough. So they all knew what was going off and all knew when we could open, what were the rules, instant. And what was great was they could all see that. So you've got different colleagues. Some would step forward and want to ask a question. We know other colleagues would like, I don't really want to ask that question, but it was great because someone asked it and then they could all see the answer.
So a lot of transparency there, you know, putting the answers out there, putting the questions out there. I imagine some of the debates that went on as well were public as well. I'm interested though also because of the, you know, level of communication there was. Were you concerned at any point at almost communication overload and people switching off because of the amount of updates that were coming in as rules and procedures changed?
Not necessarily, because it was a bit like Miranda said, peer-to-peer. So it was colleagues asking the questions. So we would push out any legal changes and any government announcements. So we would then go, okay, what does that mean for us? Push that out. But then the questions would be from colleagues.
Right.
And also it gave colleagues an opportunity to send private message to each other. So it really, really did get us through the uncertainty and did keep colleagues engaged. And we get that feedback now, Mock, in terms of thank goodness for our colleague app, because we all knew exactly what we're doing and what that meant to us. Bearing in mind, we were all making it up as we went along. And to Miranda's point, you know, sometimes we would go and say, we don't know the answer. We absolutely don't know. Let us go away and find out for you, which was really important.
I think that's an interesting thing. So working in the world of innovation, often I say it's important to say I don't know the answer. And as leaders, we kind of expect that we always, in the past, have known the answer. Ultimately, you can do all the good coaching and supporting someone, but you can actually eventually say, you need to do this. In the pandemic, we were, as you say, making it up as we went along. We didn't know what we didn't know. And I think that level of transparency, do you think it's probably built greater trust within Trustful between the leadership team and the front line?
You know what was really interesting? Because everyone was, especially, you know, March, April time, everyone was so afraid, didn't understand what was going on. And so tensions were really heightened. So we would go out saying, we don't know what that means. And then you would get potentially another colleague asking the same question or pushing for an answer. What was absolutely fantastic was colleagues would then reply saying, they've already said they don't know. Give our board and leadership time to go away and digest.
Nice.
Or it would be great, you know, Boris would make an announcement. You'd get a technician or something going on the app saying to everybody, right, announcement's just gone out. Please don't pummel our board and leadership team with questions. Allow them time to reflect, which was just absolutely overwhelming and fantastic. So
I think we're to some extent our communication's a bit more human. Like, look at us, we're all in their bedrooms, sitting rooms, spare rooms, whatever it is. We've seen into each other's homes, and we kind of, I think that whole piece around seeing the board are human beings. I remember sitting with a CEO once doing an employee value proposition, saying who I was going to interview, and she said to me, when are you interviewing me? And I sort of, oh, you know, you're paid hundreds of £1,000s a year. Why do you need to interview you? She said, you know what, I've got an opinion. I'm PAYE as well. You know, I'm a human being. It's interesting. We've talked a little bit in GAILs and Trustful about communicating internally. Laura, I know you are absolutely in high growth. And I think you said you've recruited like 180 new joiners this year.
It was 250 in the height of the pandemic last year, and yeah, we're on about 180 now. So
that's incredible. So in terms of, you know, communicating inside the organization is one thing, but also you presumably have had to kind of communicate outside, keep your employer brand alive, keep those two-way conversations with new recruit. How have you used technology, or what strategy did you have to bring people into the business and to attract people to the business during these really uncertain times?
So this is going to make me sound awful, because we're almost lucky because we've never had a market like this, where usually I don't really like the term war on talent, but people use it an awful lot, but finding people can typically be difficult. Actually, if anything, it's quite upsetting, because at the moment there are so many good people, we don't actually have enough opportunities to offer them. So we've gone from 30,000 applications a year to 60,000 last year, and we didn't do anything different with our brand. So you can see that already. We actually have more of an outbound model though, because we're high growth, because we're fintech. Actually, we work very well with retail, because typically you do things very quickly when we think about transactions. But my team tend to go more out and search. So interestingly, it's made us really say, how do we differentiate ourselves at the moment through a pandemic? So the growth is incredible, but we're tech for good. We don't really tell people that story. And more, I think, through the pandemic, people are saying, I want to work for a company with purpose and where I feel like I'm really making a difference. Our competitors are Silicon Valley men who make a lot of money and are brilliant at their jobs and have set up brilliant companies. But we were founded by a Somali man who set up our company because he wanted to create a business that was tech for good and helped people in emerging countries. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment on that brand, how we take it out to market, the way that we communicate with our candidates. Honestly, at the moment is LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Twitter, Facebook, Hired, Women in Tech, Black young professionals, women in tech in Krakow. We have offices. The complexity for us as well is we recruit in Krakow, we also recruit in Cebu, and we also recruit in London, and then every other location in the world, but they're our biggest areas. And they've all gone through pandemics at different times. So what's even more interesting is in one area where we can recruit in one certain way and we can see people face to face, then we can't do it in the other area. And the rules of engagement just change. So we're just honestly constantly chasing our tail, but it's also quite exciting for us because we're learning so quickly as we do it. From an internal perspective, you said something interesting, is that can it be communications overload? And I think what we're finding as a high growth company is that we're working honestly long hours. And I think being at home makes that almost harder to distinguish between work and home. And those that have children, everything just merges into one. So for us at the moment, it's how do we stop the amount of Zoom calls we're having? I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes by the end of the day, just all feel goggle-eyed.
We've all forgotten that you can make a phone call. You don't have to have a, you know, just I pick up the phone to people now and they're so excited to talk to me.
But it is exactly that. So actually, even within my team and our teams were saying, does it need to be on Zoom? Can you walk around the block and have a call on your phone? The same with candidates. We've gone from picking up the phone to candidates on the initial call, which is a huge shift, to always having a Zoom call. So it's this always on, especially that the TA team feel like they have to have. When we met yesterday, I'd just been for a run and had completely forgotten we had this first call, but the TA team, they have the complete opposite. They feel like they have to be constantly looking their best because they're meeting people versus in the office and picking up the phone.
So actually, you know, that's fascinating in terms of also having, you know, being a global organization and different times of the kind of waves of the pandemic. I'm just interested also thinking about nationhood and different cultures in which you operate. Have you had to flex your communication style or the technology you use to take account of different cultures that you operate within? More
the tone, actually, rather than the technology. So our colleagues in Poland are typically much more direct than we are. I almost call a spade, which works well for me because I think I must be Polish underneath. So we don't have to do too much.
HR people always call a spade, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, so we don't have to do too much in Poland. Not really. There are nuances, but they're, when it comes to recruiting, relatively minute. The way you recruit is very different because the channels are different. For them, they don't have a lot of what we have in the UK. We're quite privileged with the way that we can source. Over there, they tend not to have nearly as many platforms. So finding people is really tough. Typically, you do that through networks. That's much harder in a pandemic because you haven't got the opportunity to go to lots of events. In Krakow, they tend to recruit through events more so. Cebu is probably the one that is the biggest differentiator for us, and the pandemic has caused it. I mean, it's really difficult. The law in the Philippines, you have to have medical tests before you can work anywhere, but now you have to have medical tests plus you have 2 medical tests before you join, one I think the week before and one just as you join. But you now also are expected to do a COVID test, but legally aren't forced to do a COVID test. So actually we could hire 30 people at one time for a customer service role, and on the day have 10 people drop out because they can't join, which delays them. So the complexity for us very much is in Cebu. It's actually become quite difficult with the pandemic, and it's making it harder and harder for the teams because we can never really say, we know we've got 30 people joining. And because we're so structured there, and by design, the Filipino culture is much more structured and hierarchical, it becomes tough because if you say, right, we were going to have 30 people join, and our calls obviously have gone up in volume because our customers have gone up, and the immediacy and urgency, I guess, around why they need to send money home has become much more pivotal, and you can really feel it from a customer perspective. So we need more call agents. But if 15 of those drop out and there's a 4-week training session, you can imagine it's
interesting. There's more talent, I think, and there's more talent around, but the complexities of hiring them legally and safely have risen. And I know GAIL's, you've actually been opening bakeries during this. I want to come back in a minute, but Kirsty, we've talked a lot about including people in the conversation, being honest and authentic, really, saying when we don't know. And part of the conversation and the volume has turned up in the last year is around diversity, around inclusion, around equality, particularly, responding to some horrific global events. I'm just interested what your view is in terms of how we make sure that we're considering D, E, and I, when actually sometimes we just have to respond in the moment. How do we make sure we keep that lens so we're being inclusive, so we're adapting our tone if we need to, we're responding appropriately to our audience, and we don't just become into kind of process communication monkeys and therefore do something that actually ends up not including somebody?
Thanks, Mark. I have to say, everything that Miranda, Laura and Sharon have said reflects brilliant talents in the HR field, because it has not been easy, and flexibility has become the key to success, building back better, but also treating individuals as individuals. The protected characteristics that people have come into play, but in different ways. And there are sort of new personal circumstances like childcare, which isn't a general protected characteristic, and looking after older people and living in a house on your own for months on end when you don't see anybody, and also working from home and sitting behind a Zoom screen for hours and hours. They're all sort of new areas of not protected characteristics, but personal circumstances that really impact on individuals. And layered on top of that, you also then have the diversity aspects to each of those. So generally carers have been women, generally people who have been impacted by the pandemic if they have caught COVID. It's been disproportionate in relation to age, gender, so men are getting it worse than women, ethnicity, and weight, which isn't a protected characteristic in all circumstances, but it's the second highest factor. And so people's circumstances are so different now and so layered. There's not just one thing. So ensuring people are dealt with as individuals and not forgotten about, depending on their situation, is important. And I think, GAIL, you talked about 2 different types of workforce, those on furlough and those working, but there's actually a third, and that's those who are working from home, which you may not have, but Laura, you clearly have got, and I think Sharon, you've got it as well. And that's another type of work that has a different type of pressure. So making sure that all of those types of people are included. And I think the communication strands that you've built up peer-to-peer, but also ongoing, regardless of where you are, is really important. And I've seen a lot of people left on furlough, not communicated with, then selected for redundancy. And they may well have protected characteristics. And that's the reason why they're on furlough. So that brings straight into a diversity claim. So that's, they're making sure you do communicate. Furlough doesn't mean don't communicate. Furlough means communicate in different ways. Don't give them work. But again, we've seen people giving people work when they've been on furlough. And actually on furlough, you can still train people. And that's so important. And, you know, Miranda, your point about, you know, using different skills and, you know, reassessing the skills that you need and using those people for a different purpose, which may be their purpose in the future, is sort of the key to success. And purpose itself, what are we doing well? So Sharon, you talked about we weren't going to make any money from this, but we were doing the right thing. And that is such a critical thing now. What we are seeing in all organizations, what we're seeing from investors in relation to businesses is they don't want to invest in a business that's not good. They don't want to have anything to do with it. Neither do stakeholders, neither do customers. Customers are looking for people that behaved well.
I think that's an interesting point. I think that's an interesting point. Everyone is either mentioned directly or alluded to. Like, I'm going to throw this open to all of the panel in terms of the importance of purpose, how it's risen to the forefront over the last couple of years. And I know you were working on this years ago at Trust Forward, Sharon, but actually whether you think that has either impacted in the way you communicate with your teams wherever they are, or whether it has impacted in terms of customers' choice to be with you and brand reputation. So just to everyone, how important do you think purpose has been over the last year to guiding your employee engagement and motivation efforts?
I'm happy to go, Mark, 100%. I mean, when you have a brand that's called trust.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, and you know, external brand, and then you have a purpose, which is to drive the standard in customer care, our 4 values: true, care, honesty. You've got to, everything you do has got to be around that and pointing back to that. And we made sure that in all our internal comms, we embedded that message. And Mark, I'll talk about our EVP. You know, everyone talks about being part of the Trust Forward family. So again, it's just all that had to be, continue to be in the DNA of the organisation, and you couldn't lose sight of that. And it was great, again, people saying, you know, the Trust Forward family are really looking after us. You know, some of the feedback we would get on the app, it was just, you know, it's paramount, which meant then they go and communicate to the customers in the same way. And the big trust, yeah, says what we do, because, you know, you kind of put yourself open to, you know, everything when you decide to self-call Trust Forward.
I remember when we first had the conversation years ago about the EVP, and you were saying, you know, the key is in the name. There's an expectation. We call trust. So how do we develop that trust as a proposition? And it seems definitely to be alive and kicking there. I know you're very customer focused. Laura, you're kind of, seems to me, very purpose-driven organization. You talked about your founder, your customers potentially are those who are sometimes on the margins of financial services, potentially not top of mind of those large organizations. Has that purpose driven and motivated you differently over the last year, personally?
Yeah, so we actually ran 16 I ran 16 cultural workshops, part of EVP, but also defining our culture, because we've gone from owner and founder led to CEO led. So it's still in quite a transitional period. About 90% of our people are with us for our purpose. It's certainly the reason that I joined. I come from media, and actually it was so much fun. But don't hate me for it, and they won't hate me for saying it, but you're not always proud when you say you work for the Sun, not out loud anyway. So yes, from a purpose perspective, it's absolutely why I'm here. It's also why, like I said, at least 90% of our people are here. What's interesting from a candidate basis, we're finding more and more candidates want to work for companies that are purpose-led. I think that's been a shift in the last 5 years anyway, but the contradiction there is that where so many brilliant people are finding themselves out of work, it's not like before where the best people were in work. We have the best talent. You know, if I look for a role, I have got so many good people apply, it's almost impossible to choose the best person. And it comes down to kind of fit that I worry that externally candidates, as much as they want to be purpose-led, are understandably having to take roles that potentially they wouldn't usually take, maybe less money than they would usually have, maybe for companies that they don't fully believe in because they have mortgages or they have families or they have rent, and all of those things that maybe, whereas before they had a bit more opportunity, they're now feeling trapped. So I think the next couple of years will be really interesting.
Miranda, I'm just, you know, you operate in you know, a premium part of retail and hospitality, that, you know, you're up against a number of other kind of strong brands there. You seek very highly talented and customer focused individuals. I'm just wondering if, in terms of, you know, there's something that you in terms of GAIL's purpose, your place in the community, that you're using to really differentiate yourself against the Pretts, the Eats, the other potential competitors.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that we're in hospitality, so we've got to have some bubbly personalities. Yeah. So, you know, if you can't smile, then perhaps we're not for you, and that's okay. And during this time, you know, we've made it really hard for people to get into GAILs, because in answer to your previous question, is it's solidified why people are here, first and foremost, because we stayed open. And then what it's done is for newer people working with GAILs, it's really got them to understand, what are we doing locally that's helping our neighbours? And, you know, our waste not campaigns, our sustainability, just being there for, you know, Flossie, who doesn't want to go to Tesco's and queue up for 40 minutes, come in and having a really nice conversation with our barista, who knows that it's, you know, her birthday tomorrow. So that's been super key for us.
Do you find a different level of talent is coming through? Are there different opportunities to recruit perhaps a higher caliber individual than was potentially available before? Because, as you know, as Laura said, there are more people potentially out there in the marketplace.
Yeah. So like Laura, you know, we've seen a lot of people apply. Sometimes it's quite heart-wrenching seeing what they've lost, and then what they've done is they've come to us and said, we love you, we love what you stand for, and it's not just a job, it's, I feel I need to do something at the moment, I don't have a purpose. We had a captain and his wife from Virgin apply to come and work and learn our craft, one as a baker and one as a barista, because they loved that. I think there was a transition initially, March through to kind of June, July, and because we were fortunate enough that we opened 5 bakeries last year as well in the midst of everything, so our recruitment, like Laura, was still going on, but we saw a lot of people had been laid off quite quickly, and therefore we then saw the talent rise when you know, the around kind of September time. So we saw a bit of a difference. So we saw a massive influx. We saw our impressions on our website went up to normally 1,200 to 1,500 a month to 24,000 a month. So we knew people were coming directly to GAILs. We were able to track that traffic. But then, you know, we've got this, our ATS, our recruitment system now isn't sophisticated enough with technology, which is one of the things that we've learned through all of this, is to narrow that funnel. You know, what are the key things that we're looking for in people to come to GAILs? So we've started aligning our recruitment process, and we've absolutely learned oodles that, you know, starting with a smile on a Zoom call, and if you're a barista, we're asking you to take us and make us a coffee, or if you're a chef, we're asking you to take us to our fridge. So we're being innovative now. So we're looking at that creativity around how we bring people in.
I love that. Super. Great. And I'm just wondering, I'll again throw this open to the whole panel, in terms of, whilst we may have the talent coming in now, and there might be some elements where you've got individuals from industries that they may never have thought of working in a frontline role or in a customer service role. Do you have any concerns that as we move beyond COVID and the economy starts to right itself, that you'll see potentially then churn? And what are the implications of that from an employee engagement and retention perspective?
Mark, just a very quick point from me, sorry, Laura, is I do believe what companies have done in the last year is a true testament of their character, of why people are going to stay. So for us, where we, you know, hourly paid teams, predominantly hourly paid teams, yes, as we see hospitality open up from the 12th of April onwards, people will hop, skip and a jump for 5p, 10p, 20p. But I do believe through what we've done, that our metric now is to understand not turnover, but to understand how we have kept those people in the last year.
Super.
What I'm seeing in terms of the concerns that retailers have is really about the way employees are being treated, frontline staff are being treated by customers. And we've seen a huge rise in the discrimination claims being pursued by customers, Equality Act claims in particular. So, you know, I think that needs to be an area of focus, and there's not a lot you can do about it as an organisation. But you know, it needs some focus probably from government as well, because it is sort of out of control in some areas. I'm seeing some fairly severe cases, which are not legitimate cases either, being pursued, and adding so much anxiety to situations which are already very, very stressful.
Is this customers pursuing claims against organisations for discrimination?
Yeah. Organisations for in service, so claims in goods and services for discrimination brought in the County Court or the High Court, but the same Vento guidelines that apply in discrimination cases apply there. And historically, you would have only seen a handful of those over a number of years, but we're literally getting them in their 10s and 20s and more. So, and
what are you doing to kind of help either the partners or people within your firm, and then potentially your clients, to actually, you know, keep an eye on this, keep ahead of this, rather than being responsive, being proactive? If there's anything you can suggest that people can do to be a little bit more proactive and aware that those sorts of things, if haven't impacted them yet, may impact them in the future?
But certainly discussions like this, to say be aware of them, make sure that your frontline staff have the guidance about what they can and can't do, in particular at the moment around mask wearing. That's an issue, and what they should and shouldn't say. But we certainly know that there are individuals going out actively filming every instance that they have in a store, and then you know, we know that there are templates going to all of the stores with letters before action because of incidents like that. And obviously the individuals who are faced with a camera in their face and being challenged, it's very difficult. So making sure they're aware it's a possibility, this is what they should say, and they will be supported come what may, because it's very unfair, really, given the changing regulations, how hard it is for them to navigate that.
Because I think actually there's been a real rise in, I think culturally, in the standing of frontline customer caregivers. You know, we had the employee from Waitrose on the front cover of Vogue. They're being aligned to key workers. It's interesting, there's that strand, and then there's the also potentially at times more opportunistic strand of the claims. Laura, I think you were going to talk a little bit there about potential churn and concerns about that as the market, hopefully, God willing, starts to right itself over the next 18 months.
Yeah, we have slightly different challenges. So our customer service team is nearly 500 strong. We typically keep them for about 2 years. That's about standard in the Philippines, and they tend to churn through, but they are having a much tougher time at the moment. And they're our most engaged team. So I think their last EMPS survey came up at plus 58. So we're doing a lot to support them, and they're in a really good place. But it does worry us. It would be absurd to not think that it would. And I think because our customers, again, if they're sending money home, it feels so much more visceral at the moment, just in terms of the emotion that's involved. I think the complaints that they're getting just get tougher and tougher for them, and it's harder for them to manage. So there is a concern there, but it's probably a lesser one because we're managing it relatively well. Weirdly, it's different to the challenges that most of you are facing. It's more for us as a fintech. Most of our head office teams, we have 440 people in London. It's a stepping stone. Working for a fintech, if you're ambitious and you're a finance director or anything along those lines, or a tech person, you typically are, it's like I said, high growth. So you're working really long hours and it's tough, but it gets you your next big job. That's why people join us. So keeping people past 24 months in London is tough anyway, because they get stolen and offered more money. So now in a world where most, unfortunately, organisations are in decline and we're in high growth, our people are hot tickets. So it's a really interesting dynamic when you have all of these brilliant people in the world that are struggling to find jobs. We have people in jobs, but everybody is trying to pull them out because they're in a job and because they're in a high growth fintech, plus the hours they're working are longer. So we've introduced recharge days once a quarter on top of holiday days, which people aren't taking holiday days because everyone's saying, well, why would we? And we took a stance that we don't want to make people, we are trying to get them to take a break, which is why we said you must at least take a recharge day every quarter, which is additional to holiday. So I guess our real concern is we have these highly skilled, ambitious people that are working very long hours, that are high ticket. when the world picks up, how easy will it be for us to retain them, because they're the first people everybody will try to steal. So we're now running engagement pulse surveys every month. We're running town halls twice a month. We're working with individual departments. We're introducing new ways of working and leadership behaviours, because they're so important to us that, you know, we really don't want to lose them. So yeah, it's a really big concern.
And interesting, you're doing new things, introducing, you know, those new leadership competences. Miranda, you've been opening bakeries during this. You know, actually the pace of business, you don't just stand still and manage what you currently have. You kind of need to grow and move forward. And I know, Kirsty, you've been helping lots of organizations kind of understand the legal parameters of managing the change in the workplace, how risk can be minimized, particularly during the pandemic. Any thoughts around what people need to be thinking about as they manage change during times of massive change?
I think it's still back to engagement and making sure you understand what people can do and what can be utilised elsewhere. There's no doubt that some roles won't be there in the future, but there are new roles arising, and making sure you use the skills and retrain people where you can, and you're seen to be finding other solutions for people as much as you can. You won't. A lot of organisations won't be able to do that across the board, and there will be some reductions, but then it's a case of being open with the workforce and ensuring that if there are volunteers, people who want to move on, who want to take voluntary redundancy, or who are prepared to reduce hours, that's done by consent, and then only at the stage where you perhaps have to make some changes in closures. And we were talking just before, weren't we, Sharon, about John Lewis closures in areas that we are in, you know, then looking at collective consultation being undertaken on as constructive a path as possible, by a longer period of engagement where you can reach a resolution if possible, and if not, then treating people with dignity, because the way in which you treat those people will impact on the ones you're retaining, and the way in which you exit people from a business is what they remember as well, and what they say about you, and that's all back to your purpose and your brand. And I think that again will be under the microscope going forward, in terms of how people have managed this, how businesses have managed what is inevitable in some circumstances. There is no getting away from that at the moment, but also looking for other solutions. So suggesting different businesses or finding other retailers who need more staff and working with them. And certainly we looked at sort of matching people in the hospitality industry with some of the supermarkets to try and, you know, even have a secondment arrangement where they might help for a period of time and give them a purpose, so that when things redevelop, their skills aren't lost and they can go back into things like the airline industry and those kinds of things. So just really being innovative about that, looking at skills, looking at teamwork, looking at engagement, consent and communication, all the things that Miranda, Sharon and Laura have talked about, but putting it into practice in the more challenging areas where you're perhaps dealing with redundancies, but also unions.
I think that whole idea of being innovative and thinking differently about how you might deploy the workforce. I've read about how in South America, when McDonald's were closed, their workforce went and worked in the manufacturing plants for Unilever, developing hand sanitizers. They were still working, they still had a reason to get up every day when the business they were employed by closed. You know, we've talked about kind of the workforce employees, but I'm conscious of time. We've got a couple, so about 15 more minutes to go. Please do send a message in the chat if you have anything particularly you want to ask our panelists. We'd love to hear from you. But Sharon, we spent time together with the exec at Trustford, and you all have your own particular exec teams or partner teams that you work with. I'm just wondering how you, as a senior leader in the business, motivate and engage them and keep them communicated with, because they're humans too. They've been, to some extent, making it up as they go along. They've been homeschooling, they've been sitting in spare bedrooms, having dogs on their laps or farting quietly next to them. What have you done to keep that key population engaged? I'm going to ask Sharon to go first because I've seen you in action.
Okay, well, I think key is the sense of humour. If you haven't got a sense of humour, we would never have got through all this and carry on through this. So, you know, we've been doing lots of things. We've done bingo online on Zoom. We've been doing horse racing events on Zoom. So just trying to keep, you know, one of our principles is enjoy. So even through all of this, it's like keep hold of that enjoy. So we've done, you know, Ashcroft Arms, which is literally, you know, Friday night, 6 while 7, here's the Zoom link, come on, you know, we have a glass of wine, we share the stories for the week, and that's been open to, we've done it in all my team, then we did it, you know, for the leadership team, then we've done it wider to everybody. You know, come on and have a glass of wine and talk to the chairman about what kind of week he's had. So we've done lots of things around keeping people's spirits high, because we're also very, very conscious that, you know, as Kirsty was saying, lots of our people are now working from home, and I've been working from home since we reopened in July. A lot of those people live on their own, yeah, so they might, you know, have the opportunity that, you know, luckily they're not furloughed and they're still working, but it's a very, very lonely place. So we've had lots of feedback that those, you know, quiz nights we've had where they've just come on, they've said, you know, it's really lifted them, and they've actually looked forward to that because they've had nothing else, can't keep in, you know, contact with the family and everything. So it's about the engagement and the sense of humour. And, you know, in HR, you know, as I said, you know, we've all been making up as we've gone along, including the senior exec team. You know, we've just had to laugh sometimes and bang our heads on the, you know, on the tables, because it's the only thing that's got us through it. So
I love the idea of the Ashcroft arm. If you haven't seen it, Sharon Ashcroft. So I love, maybe put in the chat a link to the next night in the Ashcroft arms. Anyone else in terms of how you've kept your exec team engaged? Because everyone's been looking to them, but that's quite a scary place to be, isn't it?
Yeah, we've done some, like Sharon, you know, we've done some, you know, a couple of calls with a glass of wine, and also being really open and transparent. When we're having a bad day, we talk to each other, which is super important, because, you know, we're kind of seen as this, you know, there's only 6 of us in the team, but, you know, having these red capes, sometimes it's hard to put on that red cape and put this front on. So but we've also shared our challenges to the business as well, to say it's okay to not be okay. We you know, 2 things that we did that worked really well was, you know, we said, you know, what do we all love? Well, we all like eating and we all like drinking. So what we did quite quickly was, to our support teams that were kind of working from home and working from bakeries, and all of our managers, we sent out bake at home kits, because everybody was baking bread, right? And everyone was coming to us for flour and yeast and sorts of things like that. And we did a drop to everyone's home. We had a bake at home week, and we did it in half term, where it was actually in February, where, you know, children could get involved, because we've got to remember that our employees, our key stakeholders, are for those that have partners, husbands, wives, mothers, and we want to get them involved as well, to say, we know it's difficult right now, but enjoy, you know, bake at home. And we did a dirty martini night where, you know, which was great. Our managers had some really good fun with that, but we did some great podcasts. We shared the books that we were reading. We did, you know, news flashes that said what other people were doing. People were sharing things. So the other thing that we did when we were allowed, we as a leadership team spent a day in Bath, and we just went walking. We spent a day in Bath, we went walking, and we just said, right, okay, what are the things that we take from this? Because I think anybody will be amiss if they don't capture the learnings that we have gone through this time, because I really do believe that, yes, we're fast paced, we're in this growth mindset. The growth mindset isn't necessarily the number of bakeries, but how do we take people on a journey to then say, it's okay not to know, but it's also, it would be silly for us to then say, do we go back to normal?
My last question today will be about learning, so you're preempting me there slightly. That idea of kind of also bringing the children in, you know, we've been running a series of innovation training workshops with the civil service, and who've had to be so agile with things like furlough and all the changes, etc. And as part of that, they have to build prototypes of their ideas. And some of the delegates have got their kids to kind of draw their prototype and then present it to the room. And it's been lovely to see, you know, Sally or Ollie coming in and saying, well, my mummy had this idea. And then they co-present together. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Super. I wonder, also, we've talked about engaging with the workforce. We've talked about engaging and motivating, your exec team. You all have had to work incredibly hard, long hours, steel yourself for the Friday night number 10 announcements. How have you individually, I'll go around you all, how have you kept yourself resilient and taken care of your well-being, apart from the Ashcroft arms? And I've seen your photographs on Facebook with the big gin and tonics. How have you taken care of your own well-being and your own resilience over the last year? So can I start with Kirsty?
Well, my dog, Arthur, is my favourite child, and I take him for walks, and he has been my sanity, I have to say. I'm also in a choir, and we've had virtual lessons, and we had to do one of those virtual songs where you record yourself, which was quite scary, but definitely focused my mind away from work because I had to focus on what I was doing. I don't sing very well. And also one of my colleagues bought me these things, which I found a little bit of humour in, where instead of telling people that you're on mute and stuff, you can use all these different cards.
I love that.
That's just added a little bit of happiness to to some of the calls that I've got, and I keep them here all the time, so I can recommend those.
I love that, looking for a little bit of happiness and that humour point as well. Super, lovely. Laura, how have you taken care of yourself so you can take care of others over the last year?
Honestly, wine, mostly wine. Wine and exercise, actually. Interestingly, I went through a divorce at the beginning of the pandemic, so it's been a huge learning thing for me. Oh, Kirsty, I saw your face. I'm so happy. So when Sharon said people are on their own, sometimes it's not a bad thing. So honestly, a lot of exercise. I saw a meme the other day that said this lockdown's been so long, I got into shape and out of shape. So I think the first 6 months I was exercising and really fit. The last 6 months I've not been exercising apart from lifting my wine glass up, but yeah, just wine, I think.
Humour, alcohol, right, we've got, they're not deadly sins, but we're approaching them. Lovely, thank you. Sharon, what have you done?
So, like everyone else, started with wine and gin and tonics, as you know, but I've actually grasped this opportunity. I travel around the country, so we've got 60 odd locations, which I always use as an excuse as to why I'm eating McDonald's and KFC and Subways and things for lunch. So probably from about June time, when things kind of started to settle down, I actually had a bit of a chat with myself. And so I do a minimum of 10,000 steps a day, which I would never have done before. But I actually now make sure I eat healthily. So I've actually lost 2 stone, yeah, which I would never have done outside the pandemic. And that is literally because I actually eat better, because I can go to the fridge and get something healthy. There's no excuses anymore. And I'm not drinking as much coffee and things like that. So it has actually really helped. You've probably seen, we did a big breakout for Ben. Ben's our charity partner, where you could walk, cycle. So, I've made sure I still got up at 6 o'clock every morning, took the dog out, wind, rain, hail. So it's about developing a routine, sticking to that routine, which has kept me sane. Don't get me wrong. There have been times when I have been thinking, I can't do this anymore. And I've had a couple of, breakdowns in HR, because you feel like you're being pummeled. But yeah, I've just tried to make the best of kind of, the bad situation that we're in.
Yeah, I love the idea of having a conversation with yourself and sort of saying, what can I control? I firmly believe there's stuff you can control. There's stuff that you can influence, and then there's stuff you just have to let go of. Super, fantastic, absolutely great to hear that your health is so improved. I gave up Chris and limited myself to 2 coffees a day, and that has been a dramatic life change for me, I can tell you. I eke them out. This has been going for an hour and a half. I've gotten used to cold coffee. Miranda, tell us a little bit about how you personally, because you're so motivated. I've seen you in the bakeries. You're so motivated when you're there and you love the craft. How have you kept yourself motivated at home, in your beautiful home, but how have you kept yourself motivated?
Because I love food. I'm not as disciplined as Sharon. I haven't lost 2 stone. I continue to drink. How do I keep myself motivated? My 6-year-old grandson is probably my favourite human being, who brings me down to earth and is just probably the most pleasant person that I know, who will come in when I am working from home, because I use his bedroom as my office, and he will literally come home and put my laptop down. We're done now, Nanny. So that helps, because not only do I want to spend time with my grandson, but he's also, you know, he engages me and he lifts my spirits up. And I thrive on surfing the net, looking for my next holiday. I love traveling. I've got a couple of holidays that have been bumped over into this year, might be bumped over to next year, but even just, you know, it gets my juices flowing, understanding that where I can go, what I can do, looking at the cultures, the environments and all the things that are, that is something to look forward to. So I kind of have a North Star, and that North Star is normally on an aeroplane with a glass of wine somewhere.
So I think the idea of having something to look forward to is really important. I remember in September planting some bulbs that I knew would come out around the 25th of December. I didn't know who was going to be around my Christmas table. In the end, it was the husband and 3 dogs. It wasn't the family, that the 15 we normally have. But every day I looked at those flowers and thought, that's something about the future, about the future. And personally, I do gratitudes every day. I don't have a gratitude journal or anything like that, but I actually say what I'm thankful for, 3 things, and why. I learned it's not just what I'm thankful for, it's the why as well. And I do that just before I go to sleep at night, and that kind of calms me. Right, a couple of minutes left. I'm going to give you all just a quick 1 sentence. What have you learnt over the last year that you think will be able to take forward beyond COVID? So whoever wants to go first, free for all, fight. What have you learned, and what will you take beyond COVID?
I'll
Sharon.
go first. The one thing we've learned is that, you know, we can work flexibly from home and we can still be productive working from home. So let's not lose how agile we've become and how we're working differently. Let's embrace it, because that will help towards our D&I strategy. That's it.
Amen. Brilliant. Thank you. Who's next?
Yeah, I'll go. So for me, I've got 3 things. I did note these down actually. So technology, like Sharon, making the most of it, allowing our teams to be efficient. We don't always need to be in the workplace, giving people freedom to actually go and work away and still spend time with family as well. Remain agile, and allowing us to look at things urgent versus important. That's the key thing for us, is to learn what we've got and prioritise.
Super.
And go next. I think working flexibly and being able to work across the different locations and different countries in a different way, that engagement has increased no end, because we've been able to use this form of communication so much more efficiently. And I think working across practice areas, because the pandemic's required it. So working in teams of somebody from health and safety, somebody from data, and someone from employment, because those are the 3 areas that clients really need. And so actually that's become much more possible. So I want to make sure we continue that when we go forward.
I think actually I echo Kirsty the most. It's the connectivity, because we have people everywhere. Actually, we've always felt a little bit disparate, but in the strangest of ways, the pandemic has brought us together, because we're not having big meetings in London and people feel separate from that. Everything is on Zoom, so everybody is involved. And I don't think we'll ever get back to it being London centric. So that's something we're really grateful of, but we've also learned a lot from it. The other one I think is just being grateful, which I think I just said, and it probably sounds very cheesy, but just seeing how many people are unfortunate and out of work at the moment, and that we're still growing. I think as a population within WorldRemit, we're pretty grateful to be here and to be doing what we're doing. And the flexibility bit, I think, which is what everybody has said, but just for the first time, it's like we've been propelled forward 20 years, which is incredible. So just being able to say, actually, maybe when the world opens up, I could work from Cornwall on a Friday, or the teams could work from Cornwall on a Friday, and life and work can be a bit more intertwined.
Super. Well, we'll open a branch of the Ashcroft Arms in Padstow, I think.
Yeah, and also it's just, we've got to have fun. You know, for those of us in retail, you've got to have some fun.
Well, I think we've had some fun this morning. Thank you so much for sharing your best practice, your very personal experiences as well. I have no doubt from what we've heard this morning, your enthusiasm and your expertise, that you do have motivated and engaged colleagues. Hopefully we will have a bit of fun. Thank you so much for your contribution. To our delegates, that ends our first session this morning. Do join us again at 11:30 when we'll be talking about the importance of culture, well-being and values. But for now, have a great morning, and if you can, pop over to GAIL to get yourself a coffee.
Well done. Thanks, Mark. Thanks,
Bye.
Mark.
Bye. Bye.